everyone. My name is Nitin Nahar. We are going to go through the amendments for May 2021 CA final indirect taxes. Now, before wasting any further time, let's quickly go to the sheet. Yeah, this is the sheet amendment for May 2021. You will find Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, merger of Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Now, the first thing which has happened is Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are now divided into two parts. Now, when we say they are divided into two parts, Jammu and Kashmir is considered separate, Ladakh is considered to be separate. So, if there is a transaction between Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, IGST will be applicable. Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli are at present merged. Now, when I say they are merged, in such cases, if there is a transaction between Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, C plus UT GST will be applicable, not IGST. Let's have a look at a small diagram which will help you to understand this entirely with all the detailing. Now, this is the diagram I am looking at. 29 states. This you can write it in that space which is there in the amendment sheet. 29 states. At present, there are 28 states. The state of Jammu and Kashmir is broken into two union territories, Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Union Territory of Ladakh. And then what has happened? Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli are merged into one union territory. Now, there are three union territories which are union territories with legislature. Which are those three union territories with legislature? The ones in the brown. 1, 2, 3. Delhi, Pondicherry, Jammu and Kashmir. What's the relevance of this? If there is a transaction within these union territories, C plus S will be applicable, not C plus UT. Be very careful. Within Delhi, C plus S. Within Pondicherry, C plus S. Within Jammu and Kashmir, C plus S. But what about the other 5 union territories? The other 5 union territories will have C plus UT if the transaction is within that union territory. Like within Andaman and Nicobar, C plus UT. Within Ladakh, C plus UT. Within Chandigarh, C plus UT. And if there is a transaction between two different union territories, two different states, or one state and one union territory, then IGST will be applicable. Be very careful with regard to this first very important change which has happened. Now, when I say three union territories are regarded as states, then the total number of states which come would be 31 for the purpose of GST. 28 states plus Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir, and Pondicherry. Now, when will you charge C plus S? You will charge C plus S when the transaction is within one state. C plus UT when the transaction is within one union territory. And what are the two important things which you check? Whether the transaction is within a state or outside the state. There are two important things. One, location of supplier. Second one, place of supply. These are the two things which you check to understand the type of tax. If the location of supplier and place of supply is within the same state or same union territory, then C plus S or C plus UT. But if the location of supplier and place of supply are in two different states, two different union territories, one state or one union territory, then what would you charge? Then you would be charging IGST. Now, let's see some examples on this so that we get a complete clarity on this particular point. See this. First one, supplier is in Jammu and Kashmir, recipient is in Jammu and Kashmir. I am assuming that the place of supply is Jammu and Kashmir because at present I am just taking the recipient's location as place of supply. You know that as per 10, 11, 12, 13 of IGST Act 2017, place of supply is determined. And after you determine the place of supply, you compare two things. Location of supplier, place of supply. If both are in within the same state, C plus S or C plus UT. they are in different states, you directly charge IGST. So Jammu and Kashmir to Jammu and Kashmir, what would be charged? The answer is CGST plus SGST, because Jammu and Kashmir is considered to be a state for the purpose of GST. Ladakh to Ladakh, Ladakh to Ladakh, C plus UT. Jammu and Kashmir to Ladakh. See, Jammu and Kashmir to Ladakh, earlier it was same, so C plus S was charged, but at present, Jammu and Kashmir to Ladakh, IGST would be charged. And whenever I am talking about these cases, I am taking location of supplier, place of supply. I am assuming that the place of supply is location of the recipient. That is generally, that's the principle which is adopted in place of supply. Okay. Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. The answer will be C plus UT. This is where you have to be very careful. Daman and Diu to Dadra and Nagar Haveli. These are merged. As these are merged, what will be applicable is C plus UT. Moving forward, Daman and Diu to Andaman and Nicobar. Daman and Diu to Andaman and Nicobar. The answer will be IGST. And Delhi to Delhi, and there is a transaction within Delhi, what would be charged is C plus S. Why? Because Delhi is also considered to be a state. And Delhi to Mumbai, IGST will be applicable. A clear with this? Yes. So the first amendment is Jammu and Kashmir is at present broken into two parts, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. That means transaction between them will have IGST. But Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, these two are merged. And if there is a transaction within them, then you will charge C plus UT. Clear? Okay. Out of this, you can have a note of whatever you feel as relevant for you in this space. So the first one was Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh and merger of the Union Territory. I'll just show you the diagrams once. This is one. And the second one was cases. Okay. Coming to the new exemption. See, actually, these are the 2 points which are added for May 21. But I have just included other 3 also, which have been regularly brought into notice. First one, satellite launch services. Satellite launch services provided by Antrix Corporation, ISRO, or New Space India Limited. Satellite launch services provided by any of these 3 have been exempted from GST. This benefit is obviously given for the purpose of encouraging satellite launch services being provided by these 3 entities. So we used to study this with a circular in place of supply, saying that satellite launch of the place of supply will be outside India because it is transportation of goods. But at present, that circular has become completely irrelevant because at present, satellite launch services by Antrix Corporation Limited, ISRO, or New Space India Limited have been exempted from GST. Government-owned entities providing these services, government have given a relief to these companies. Yes. So we have satellite launch services supplied by Indian Space Research Organization, Antrix Corporation Limited, and New Space India Limited, which would not be liable to GST. Okay. Then if we see the next point, services by way of transportation of goods by an aircraft or vessel in respect of export of goods will be exempted till 30th September 2021. This was 30th September 2020, which has been extended to 30th September 2021. I'll just show you what it was. If the transportation is from a place in India to a place outside India, goods being transported whether by an aircraft or vessel from a place in India to the place outside India, it's a case of export. As it's a case of export, say suppose the consignment is booked by the person who is in India and the person who is taking the goods is also registered in India. In such cases, there used to be issues with regard to taxation. Government has extended this exemption for further 1 year, and at present it would be applicable till 30th September 2021. Very few amendments, but these are very basic things which have been there from a very long time, and government has just changed the date. So remember, outside India to India, transportation of goods by an aircraft or vessel would not be liable to GST. Already there in the notes, it has just been extended for 1 more year. Fine. Now, what about a training program where the entire amount of fee for that training program is paid by government? Obviously, an exemption should be there. This is similar to a case where a life insurance policy where the entire premium is being paid by government. That is already exempt. This is also brought in where for any training program, services provided to central government, state government, or union territory administration, where the total expenditure, please underline the term total expenditure. The total expenditure is borne by the government. In such cases, GST has been exempted for such training programs. Okay. Then we already had this where storage, warehousing of certain cereals, pulses, fruits, nuts and vegetables, spices, copra. Copra is coconut, sugarcane, jaggery, raw vegetable fibers such as cotton, flax, jute, unmanufactured tobacco, betel leaves, kendu leaves. These are forest produce as well. Some of them are forest produce, tea and coffee. Now, to encourage storage and warehousing services being provided for food products. Basically, all these are food products or very important raw materials for an industry like cotton, flax, jute, very important for as a raw material. And to that extent, government has given an exemption. Be very careful, it's only for unmanufactured tobacco, not for a complete tobacco. Unmanufactured tobacco leaves, those are stored by small farmers, and that's why government has given an exemption, because if the warehouse owner charges GST, it would become a cost to the farmers. That's why government has given an exemption for certain products which are stored by farmers so that they don't have to incur an additional cost in relation to storage of these products. Clear with this? Okay. Then another general insurance scheme has been exempted, Bangla Shasya Bima. Bangla Shasya Bima, again, it's for the West Bengal Bangla Shasya Bima which is taken, and again, this Bangla Shasya Bima which is being taken, GST would not be charged on such insurance policies. Now, when we talk about the third point, composition scheme for service industry, please understand one thing. This composition scheme for service industry was introduced. You remember 1.5 crore is applicable for a manufacturer, is applicable for a trader, and is applicable to a restaurant service provider. Correct? Then government had brought in 50 lakh. Now this 50 lakh is available to any person who cannot claim this, plus there are other conditions which are there. So this is basically for service providers, maybe pure service providers or service providers which have some amount of good supply as well. But the check which has to be done is whether their preceding financial year turnover does not exceed 50 lakh. If it does not exceed 50 lakh, then they have an option to pay taxes at 3% plus 3%. Now, this was already there in the law. Rules have been amended to this extent to provide that 3% and 3% will be applicable for turnover in a state on supply of goods and services. So there might be cases where service industry has some amount of goods or services being supplied. So that some amount of goods or services which is being supplied, that portion, if it does not exceed 50 lakh, you can take this composition scheme. And once you take this composition scheme, you can pay 3% plus 3%. 3% CGST and 3% SGST. Is there an IGST rate? The answer is no, because under composition scheme, a person cannot make an interstate supply. As he cannot make an interstate supply, obviously there is no IGST rate given in composition scheme. So this you would have already studied. It's merely an addition of a rule in CGST rules where they clearly specified that 3% plus 3% of turnover in a state on goods or services. Because see, it is basically for service providers, but a service provider might have some sales. Like, say, suppose I am a service provider. I can have a sale of a laptop, which is my business laptop. In such cases, should composition scheme 3% plus 3% be available to me? The answer is yes, that 3% plus 3% would be available to me. Clear? Okay. Now, if you see the next page, you will find there is an important CBIC circular on director remuneration. See, this again is something which was already there in the law. It's just a circular which is introduced by government so that they can define the taxability of director remuneration. Tell me one thing. Say suppose a particular director is getting salary. Deduction of tax is happening under section 192 of Income Tax Act 1961. Now, if the deduction is happening in Income Tax Act 1961 192 section, that means it's salary. Will GST be applicable on that? The answer is no, because it is covered by negative list. But for example, I take a sitting fee which is taken by an independent director. In such cases, he is not acting as an employee. There the TDS under Income Tax Act would be under 194J. Now, in such cases, whether GST will be applicable, the answer is yes. Director to body corporate, tax is to be paid by the body corporate. Reverse charge mechanism is applicable. Correct? It's not covered by salary. Okay. Till here, it was already very clear. Now coming to whole-time directors, or it could be any other. Government has given an example of a whole-time director. The whole-time director might get fees and commission where the tax is being deducted in some other section, not under 192 of Income Tax Act, not under salary head. It is being deducted as commission, it is being deducted as fee. In such cases, whether GST would be applicable? The answer is yes. And what about whole-time director getting salary? Sir, whole-time director getting salary, that is being covered under TDS. GST will not be applicable. But fees or commission, yes, GST will be applicable. Reverse charge mechanism, company will have to pay tax directly to government. Hey, clear with this? Yes, mere circular being issued in respect of director remuneration. Simple rule, 192 or not under 192. If the tax is being deducted under 192 of Income Tax Act 1961, then it's salary. You will not have GST on that. Otherwise, yes, GST would be applicable. And who would pay GST? Director to body corporate. Body corporate would pay the GST. Okay. Now let's see the change which has happened in registration chapter. Very small change, because for May 21, this is a small change. For November, this has increased much further, but we'll stick to what is the change happened for May 21. Now, let me first give you a quick background of how the registration process works, so that I'm able to quickly tell you where is the amendment. Now, see, whenever you go for GST registration, you have to go to this website, gst.gov.in. You fill in part A, PAN, email ID, mobile number, state, etc. is written. You receive the OTPs. You fill in those OTPs. You get two OTPs, one on your mobile phone, one on email ID. You fill both the OTPs. Click on submit. You get a temporary reference number, not registration number. Be very careful. You get a temporary reference number. Now, after getting this temporary reference number, you can fill the part B of the form. That is fill specified details. Now one detail has been added in this. Sir, what's that? Aadhaar authentication. Aadhaar authentication has been made as an additional field while you fill the specified details. Now, if you go through the Aadhaar authentication process, in that case, the entire provision which you have read now remains same. Not even a single change if Aadhaar authentication is successful. First, let's talk about Aadhaar authentication being successful. Then we will talk about Aadhaar authentication not being successful, or a person not opting for Aadhaar authentication. Okay. You fill the specified details. One detail has been added, that is Aadhaar authentication. Then you submit it. Then the application is forwarded to proper officer. Can the proper officer sit on the application? The answer is no. There is a point saying that if he does not take any action within 3 working days, then deemed registration. Yes. Yes, sir. So he has to take some action. What action? Either he is satisfied or he is not satisfied. Now, if he is satisfied, then he will give us the registration. If he is not satisfied, then he has to inform us about the discrepancies. He will issue a show cause notice. Now, once he issues a show cause notice, thereafter you get 7 days time to reply. Again, once you have replied, can he sit on the application? The answer is no. He has to take action within 7 working days. If he does not take action within 7 working days, deemed registration again. Agreed? Okay. So if he is satisfied, he will give you the registration. If he is not satisfied, then application will be rejected. This entire process is intact if Aadhaar authentication is applied for and it is successfully completed. Sir, what is the meaning of Aadhaar authentication? You'll get a hyperlink. Once you get that hyperlink, you will go for the filling of Aadhaar number. Once you fill in that Aadhaar number, one OTP will go to that mobile number and email ID. You have to enter that OTP, Aadhaar authenticated. That's it. The only additional feature which is there is only once Aadhaar authentication is complete, only then it will be forwarded to proper officer. It will be forwarded to proper officer only when Aadhaar authentication is completed. But sir, say suppose I have not opted for Aadhaar authentication. If you have not opted for Aadhaar authentication or Aadhaar authentication fails within the time limit given, in that case, it will be forwarded to proper officer and see the change. See this carefully. If no Aadhaar authentication or the Aadhaar authentication fails, in that case, replace 3 working days with 21 days. Replace 3 working days with 21 days. Which 3? This 3, this 3, this one. No action taken by proper officer. 3 days deemed registration. That has become 21 days. It has further changed for November 21, but we'll stick for the amendment for May. 3 working days replaced by 21 working days plus registration will be granted only after physical verification is completed. Only after physical verification is completed. So be very careful. One change is 3 working days is changed to 21 working days. For everyone, for only those who have not undergone Aadhaar authentication. Clear? Okay. Then physical verification will be carried out. Only then registration will be granted. Clear with this? Yes. Sir, if I have done Aadhaar authentication, can the department still do a physical verification? At present, the procedure remains same, but that is a change going forward where physical verification may be carried out by the officer. It is at his discretion. But sir, within 21 days, if he does not do a physical verification, in that case, you will get your registration, because the law also provides that after this 21 days, there would be a deemed registration. Clear with this? Yes. Okay. Let's have a look at the provision. Aadhaar authentication is a new field which is added for applying for registration. The application is said to be complete once Aadhaar authentication is complete if a person has opted for it. Aadhaar authentication is to be carried out by authorized signatory. For a proprietor, for a partnership firm, the authorized partner, for a company, the authorized director, for a trust, the authorized trustee. All these will be the authorized signatory. Okay. If no Aadhaar authentication is carried out, in that case, registration shall be granted only after physical verification or verification of documents. However, proper officer with the approval of Joint Commissioner may grant registration based on document verification instead of physical verification. This is a power which is available to at the discretion of the officer. He can go to the Joint Commissioner and say, I don't want to go and do a physical verification. I have verified all the documents and now I can issue the registration to the applicant. Okay. The time limit for taking action by proper officer and deemed registration is enhanced to 21 days from the date of filing registration application where Aadhaar authentication is not done. So if Aadhaar authentication is not done, in that case, 21 days. Okay. Now, interest, see, this is already there, but you would have already come across it, but I'll just explain you this interest point again. See, interest on delayed payment, 18% per annum from the due date till the date of payment. This 24% per annum point is not there because section 42 and section 43 are even today not operational. So never use this 24% in the exam. So use 18% per annum in the exam. Now, see note 1. Tell me one thing. Say suppose my output tax is 6 lakh. My ITC is 5 lakh. My tax payable is 1 lakh. So the question is, GST will be applicable. I mean, interest will be applicable on 6 lakh or 1 lakh. Sir, it should apply on whatever is the amount which is payable through e-cash ledger. Hey, careful. Whatever is the amount payable through e-cash ledger, on that amount interest will be applicable. Correct? This is what the provision says. So this is the amendment which has been brought. Earlier, there was a confusion whether interest would be applicable on gross liability or net liability. Now government has clarified that it will apply on net liability. That means the amount which you are depositing through e-cash ledger. If you are depositing 1 lakh through e-cash ledger, on that it would be applicable. And say suppose there is a delay in filing. Say suppose I talk about March 2021 return. What's the due date? The due date is 20th April. Now I delay filing this. I file it by 30th June. Now if I file it by 30th June, in that case, interest would be applicable on 1 lakh. That is the tax which I have to pay through e-cash ledger. But you have to report these transactions correctly. If you have failed to report these transactions, in that case, you might have to pay tax on full liability. Plus, there should not be a case where a notice is issued to you under section 73, 74. If a notice is issued and thereafter you file your return, then interest will apply on full tax liability, that is gross tax liability. Clear with this? Yes, sure. Important point, see the wordings of the law. Provided that interest on tax payable in respect of supplies made during a tax period and declared in the return. That means you have reported it in the return, though you have furnished it after due date. Declared in the return, furnished after the due date, in accordance with section 39. 39 is GSTR 3, 4, 5, etc. This is 39. Shall be levied on the portion of the tax that is paid by debiting e-cash ledger. By debiting e-cash ledger, on that amount it would be applicable. Okay, sir. However, this benefit is not, circle the word not, is not available in case where such return is furnished after the commencement of proceedings under 73 and 74. Whether it is a notice for other than fraud cases or fraud, willful misstatement and suppression cases, doesn't matter. In both the cases, if notice is issued and thereafter you file the returns, then in that case, sorry, you'll have to pay interest on the entire gross liability. Very important point from examination point of view. Read this very carefully and read the question carefully, whether it's on gross or net, depending on whether notice was issued and then you filed the return or you filed it late yourself. Okay. Then we have a point on manner of issuing e-invoice. Yes, e-invoice has been introduced with effect from 1st October 2020. That means it would be applicable for your exams because all the amendments till 31st October 2020 are applicable for your exams. Now, what's the change with regard to e-invoicing? What is e-invoicing all about? See, you have your software, Tally, ERP, or any other software. Same way as you were generating an invoice, you will generate. So through the software, you generate invoice. Now, after generating invoice, there are certain fields which are to be entered on e-invoice portal. There are totally 10 e-invoice portals. E-invoice 1, .gst.gov.in. Like this, there are 10 e-invoice portal. E-invoice 1, e-invoice 2, 3, it goes till 10. You have to send specific data to this e-invoice portal. Now, once you send this data to e-invoice portal will throw up a IRN, will give you a IRN, invoice reference number. Now, once this invoice reference number is available with you, it is now an authentic document. Now the information is there at the government portal. It does not get stored there. Thereafter, it is transmitted to GSTR1 data. But this invoice reference number is what is important. This invoice reference number acts as a control mechanism to reduce the fake invoices which have increased drastically in India. That is the basic purpose. Now, this invoice reference number generated to be added on the invoice. Once this is done, thereafter, there is no issues on the authenticity of the invoice. Yes, you can also get it cancelled, and at present, it is applicable only for B2B transactions and export transactions. That means it's not applicable for B2C transactions because they wanted to tap those who were taking ITC based on fake invoices. Now they will not be able to take ITC on fake invoices because all B2B invoices have to be authenticated through e-invoice. Now, sir, is it applicable to everyone? For your exams, it's applicable for a person whose turnover is more than 500 crores in any of the preceding financial year before 1st October 2020. 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20. In any of these three preceding financial years, if a person's turnover has crossed 500 crores, aggregate turnover, that means turnover of all the branches will be added. If aggregate turnover exceeds 500 crores in any of the three financial years, in that case, he has to get an e-invoice, and he can generate only e-invoices. Clear with this? Yes. Okay. Now, in such cases, there is no need to generate duplicate and triplicate copy because there will be one e-invoice. That's sufficient. Government also plans to introduce QR code, but QR code, there's deferment which has been done. Quick reference code, QR scanning, you use it for scanning. There is a deferment even today when I am speaking. So till 1st April, they have allowed that QR code, even if it is not there, that's fine. That's why at present, QR codes are not relevant for your May 2021 exams. Now, let's talk about the provisions which are there, and let's also see one important feature where certain industry players are not required to generate e-invoice. Like if you are engaged in transportation of passenger service, GTA, SEZ, cinema halls, these are not required to generate e-invoice. Let's see the list. E-invoice shall be prepared by notified class of registered persons. By notified class of registered persons. Who is notified? See this. Shall be mandatory for a registered person whose aggregate turnover in any of the preceding financial years from 17-18 exceeds 500 crores. Okay, sir. Come back. E-invoice shall be prepared by notified class of persons. Is notified class of persons there? Yes, it is there. On the recommendation of council, by including such particulars as contained in form GST INV. INV is invoice. After obtaining an invoice reference number by uploading information on the prescribed electronic portal. You can just write one example of the prescribed electronic portal, einvoice1.gst.gov.in. Okay. Next one is the most important thing. E-invoice issue, every invoice issued in any other manner shall not be treated as an invoice. Hey, if it is not treated as an invoice, say suppose I am required to generate e-invoice, but if I fail to generate e-invoice, in such cases, that document which I have issued will not be treated as an invoice. That means my recipient will not get ITC. That means my recipient will not get ITC because one of the conditions in section 16 of CGST Act clearly provides that I am in possession of an invoice. That means if I'm not in possession of an invoice, in such cases, I will not get ITC. Clear? Okay. The requirement for preparing invoice in duplicate and triplicate does not apply to e-invoice. Then we have seen who are the persons. It's not e-invoice like electronic invoice. It's just an additional authentication. Okay. However, irrespective of the turnover, it will not apply for the following: SEZ unit, insurance company, banking company or a financial institution, goods transport agency, person supplying passenger transport service, or multiplex cinema, admission to a cinematographic film in multiplex screens. A clear yes. Okay. Now, you remember section 44 and section 35. Reconciliation statement. GSTR 9C to be certified by a chartered accountant and or cost and management accountant. Yes. Okay. This was required if any person's aggregate turnover exceeds 2 crore. This is the provision. This 2 crore has been enhanced for FY 18-19 and 19-20. So for FY 18-19 and 19-20, it has become 5 crore. See, already they had enhanced it for 18-19. Now they have also enhanced it for 19-20. See, in future, there is a plan to scrap this, but for your exams, just read that for FY 18, 19, 19, 20, the limit for submission of reconciliation statement, which is to be certified by a chartered accountant or a cost and management accountant, is enhanced to 5 crores. Yes. Okay. Now, there are some circulars issued by CBIC on refund. What I have tried to do is I have tried to pick up some important areas from that and give you here so that you can easily recall it before the exam. See this. Important points from circulars issued by CBIC in relation to refund. Let's see. Say suppose I have claimed a refund. My refund application shows that I can claim 80,000 as a refund. Now, I am talking about ITC balance, unutilized ITC balance, correct? I will have unutilized ITC balance. That is what is available as a refund to me in case of zero rated supplies. Now, I have balance of I, C, and S. Which one should I claim first? See, eligible amount is 80,000. Which one should I claim first? Should I claim I, C, or S? Government has given a clarification. First, you will claim whatever amount is there in I. So if 40,000 is there in I, claim this. Okay. Thereafter, say suppose here you have 30,000 balance and here you have 35,000 balance. So which one will you claim? 20 from here and 20 from here. That means C and S equally. Hey, did you understand this? Sir, if there is a shortfall, then you can claim the S component extra, no issues on that. Hey, clear? So first claim IGST as refund. Thereafter, C and S equally. IGST completely, thereafter C and S equally. If still there is a shortage of your eligible amount, in such cases, you can go with any of the balance amounts which are there in C or S. Clear with this? So ICS, manner of claiming ICS. I'll just write here first I and then C and S equally, and then remaining ITC. Okay. Okay. Now, see the next point. Clubbing of refund application for different financial years. See, you can file refund application monthly, you can file refund application quarterly, half yearly, yearly. It's left to your discretion. But the question which was asked is, can I club two financial years together? Because the time limit for claiming refund is 2 years from the relevant date. So can I club two financial years and file a single refund application? CBIC has said yes, allowed. Yes, allowed. Okay. Now see the next one. Refund of unutilized ITC to be based on GSTR 2A, a very important thing. Refund of unutilized ITC to be based on GSTR 2A. That means, say suppose my supplier has not filed his GSTR 1. It's not coming in my 2A. If it's not coming in my 2A, I cannot claim a refund of that particular amount. Sir, that 10% rule, 10% rule 36(4), that is still 10% applicable for your exams. For your exams, it still remains 10%. Sir, what was this 10% rule? 10% was, say suppose, to the extent of 80 rupees, my suppliers have uploaded. But actually in my books, the credit was 100. But 2A is showing only 80. Then how much can I claim as per 36(4)? 80 plus 10% of 80, that is 8. Total 88 I could claim. Correct. Now, when I'm claiming refund, it will be strictly based on 80 and not 88. Hey, did you understand this? Yes. So only for that refund can be claimed. This is a CBIC circular. Be very careful about this in the exam. Okay. Then the last point is, say suppose there is an inverted tax structure. Hey, what's the meaning of inverted tax structure? your output is subject to a lower rate compared to your input. Output is subject to a lower rate compared to your input. Now, the question was, if there is a reduction in GST rate, can traders claim it? Because otherwise, traders will never have a situation that their output is subject to a lower rate and input is subject to a higher rate. This happens for manufacturers because raw material is subject to a higher rate, finished goods at a lower rate. That is where inverted duty structure works. For a trader, this is never possible because 18% purchased, 18% sold. For him, there is no question of inverted duty structure. The question was whether a trader can claim refund under inverted tax structure when there is a reduction in GST rate. Let me explain you. A particular product was subject to 18%. So trader purchases at 18%, sells at 18%. No problem? Yes, no problem. Now he purchases for 18. Then the GST rate comes down. Government has reduced the GST rate to 12. Now when he is going to sell it, he is going to sell it at 12. Can such trader claim refund under inverted tax structure? Our CBIC has said no. Our CBIC has said no. This is not permitted. Clear with this? Yes. Yes. 4 important points which I wanted to take through. This is the additional thing, but just taken you through with all the 4 points. Okay. Let's move forward. A very small change which has happened in Rule 140 to pre-notice consultation. Let me tell you. Show cause notice is issued by the proper officer. The time limit under normal period of limitation, that is section 73, is 2 years 9 months, and for extended period, that is section 74, it is 4 years and 6 months. Now before issuing a show cause notice, Rule 142 said that proper officer has to issue a pre-notice consultation saying that I am going to issue a show cause notice, and he had to issue it. Proper officer was required to issue a pre-notice consultation saying that I am going to issue the notice if you don't pay this. That was pre-notice consultation. It was DRC 01A. Now this pre-notice consultation got challenged in various courts where some cases the officer had directly issued show cause notice without issuing pre-notice consultation. This resulted into show cause notice being invalid because the law was not followed. Law provided that he has to issue a pre-notice consultation. Government changed the law. Government said at present they have made it optional. Pre-notice consultation is now optional. That means if the proper officer wants, then he can issue a pre-notice consultation form DRC 01A. Otherwise, he can directly issue a show cause notice. So at present, for your exams, can an officer directly issue a show cause notice? The answer is yes. Pre-notice consultation has been made optional for the proper officer. If he wants, he will go for a pre-notice consultation. Otherwise, he will directly issue you a show cause notice. Clear? Small change. Shall has been made may. He may issue a pre-notice consultation. Okay. Then, now let's see this. Registration of corporate debtors under IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Now, see what has happened. Say suppose a company is getting into IBC proceeding, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. That company is not having resources to pay entire creditors. So they get into insolvency. While they are in insolvency, now, the entire matter is with NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal. While the matter is in National Company Law Tribunal, who will function on behalf of the company? So for this, there will be a resolution professional which will be appointed. Interim resolution professional or a resolution professional. What is the job of this resolution professional? He will try to find out the total picture, like what is the amount due, what can be sold, what is the stock available, where are invoices pending, what is the GST payable. He will try to keep the company in place till the NCLT proceedings are over. National Company Law Tribunal proceedings are over. So during this time, whether the company will file GST returns or resolution professionals. And resolution professional, should he continue with the existing registration or take a new registration? This was the issue. CBIC came up with a circular saying that this interim resolution professional or resolution professional has to take a separate registration as a distinct person. I'll tell you the reason. Because there is one principle in law. First, previous tax period dues will be adjusted, then current tax period dues. So in such cases, now previous tax period dues of the company will be very high. Government wants, if that is the case, now you will not be able to sell any assets. So while you are selling assets now, again there will be GST because you are selling business asset. Who will pay this GST? Interim resolution professional. Who can take ITC on some services, like say suppose during NCLT proceedings, a chartered accountant's consultation is taken as to how better can the company be worked upon. Chartered accountant will charge GST. Can IRP or RP take ITC of that? The answer is yes. So IRP or RP will take a separate registration, fresh registration, and it will be called as a distinct person. That distinct person can take ITC on behalf of the company. Even if there are some invoices earlier on which ITC was not taken, he can take on that as well. Plus, he is responsible to discharge tax, which is required to be discharged during the time when he is in control of the company. Basic objective. Clear? Yes. Okay. Now let's see. As per IBC, once the entity defaults certain threshold amount, corporate insolvency resolution process gets triggered and management of such entity and its assets vest with the IRP or RP. Okay. IRP or RP will continue to run the business and operational as a going concern till insolvency proceedings is over and an order is passed by NCLT. The definition of these terms is given in IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Government has prescribed special procedure under Section 148 for corporate debtors who are undergoing this entire resolution process. The corporate debtor who is undergoing this process is treated as a distinct person of the corporate debtor and shall take a new registration in each state where the corporate debtor was registered earlier within 30 days from the appointment of this IRP or RP. The IRP will be liable to furnish returns and make payment of tax and comply with all the provisions of GST law during the process. During this corporate insolvency resolution process, he will be required to pay out the taxes and claim ITC in respect of the company in his first return. Even if the invoice have the GSTIN of the company, he can still claim on certain pending invoices. Clear with this? Okay. Now, these were the amendments which have happened in GST. One important point, 36(4), 10% is still applicable to you. 86A, the power to block e-credit ledger balance. Proper officer has that power even now. Those are two important points. Please be very careful on those two important points. Then, now let's talk about customs. Customs, not any major change, a very, very minute change has happened. You recall deferred payment? Sir, what was deferred payment? Deferred payment is, First clearing the goods and then making the payment. First clearing the goods from the port and then making the payment. So any consignment which is cleared between 1st to 15th, tax can be paid by 16th of the same month. Any consignment which is cleared 16th till end of month, tax can be paid by 1st of the next month. And if this 16th is March, if it's March, then by 31st March. Hey, you remember this deferred payment scheme? Deferred payment scheme, first clearing it and paying it at once. Now, this deferred payment scheme is available to Tier 2, Tier 3 authorized economic operators. Authorized economic operators, basically, who have good reputation, have a status of an authorized economic holder, and based on this authorized economic holder, they can make or get into this deferred payment scheme. This deferred payment scheme has now been allowed to authorize public sector undertakings. Now, who is this public sector undertaking which has been allowed? See this. It is available to a public undertaking of central government or state government which satisfies the following criteria. There are too many criteria which are given. Now, first must be a government company or a statutory corporation, department or autonomous body, must have a IEC, obviously they will have, must be recommended for availing this facility by an officer not below the rank of Deputy Secretary in the Government of India. So the Revenue Secretary has to give an advice that please go for this scheme, and then must undertake to comply with the provisions of deferred payment scheme, and then must adhere to the legal compliances as per section 3.2 of revised authorized economic operator scheme, which is not there for your syllabus. There should not be any show cause notice which has been issued on him in last 3 financial years for any fraud case. There should not be an ongoing prosecution provision, and there should not be show cause notice other than A and B, in last 3 financial year, which is more than 10% of the total amount. If these conditions are satisfied, then he can become a equivalent to a authorized economic operator. He will be called as an authorized public sector undertaking, and he can get this deferred payment scheme. Too many conditions added and all these conditions satisfied, only then this deferred payment scheme will be available to public sector undertakings. Okay, clear with this? Yes. Yes. Now, you can just read it once, not very important for exam, because all these conditions would not come, but just read it once. Okay. Again, the last one is also not very important, but yeah, this has been added in the law, but nothing has been prescribed. There is a new ledger planned, ledger for duty credit. See, you understand one thing, that if you are into export business, you get duty scripts, correct? FTP, you get duty scripts. Now those duty scripts are freely tradable. Now government is planning that now there will be a e-credit ledger, similar to your e-credit ledger in your GST. This e-credit ledger, government will deposit the amount as for duty scripts in this e-credit ledger. Now you can use it for custom duty payment, or you can also transfer it to someone else. So both the option will be available. This scheme is yet to be notified, but this is the plan. So first the section is now introduced in the law, and maybe in some time they will also make it operational. So till the time it's made operational, I don't think a question would come as per this, but yes, go through this once so that we don't get into any risk. See, central government may by notification specify the manner in which it shall issue duty credit in lieu of remission of duty chargeable on any material used in manufacture, processing, or for carrying out any operation on such goods in India that are exported. See, while you make a export product, there are a lot of costs which you incur on the purchase. As you incur a lot of cost, there are some taxes which government wants to refund. Now, these taxes which government wants to refund, they have come up with a scheme, a remission scheme, where they will give this to you. Now, when they are giving that amount, where will they give it? They will give it in this ledger. There'll be a separate ledger similar to your e-credit ledger, or in lieu of other financial benefits subject to conditions specified therein. The duty credit issued as mentioned above shall be maintained in custom automated system. Custom automated system is where you file bill of entry online in the form of electronic duty credit ledger of the person who is the recipient of such duty credit in such manner as may be prescribed. Now, the duty credit available in electronic duty credit ledger may be used by the person to whom it is issued or the person to whom it is transferred for making payment of duties payable under this act or under Custom Tariff Act in such manner and with such conditions as may be placed. So what is the use of this duty credit which will come in your duty credit ledger? You can either use it to pay custom duty, or you can transfer it to someone else and he can use it for paying custom duty. So something which was done through duty scripts, that is form, now it will be in electronic mode. Clear with this? Yes. So this was the last point of the amendments. Wishing you all the best for your exams. Very few amendments are there in IDT this time. Do well. Take care. Bye bye.